Good morning. It is 10:08 a.m. on Sunday, May 6th, 2018. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. Today is Sunday, so I'm doing my rewatch of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. And this is the penultimate episode of the first season, which is the only season I'm doing for this rewatch. Episode 25, Smoke of Gunpowder, Hail of Bullets, aka Barrage. And this is a hell of an episode. It has moments of triumph and sentiment, but also seems pretty bleak by the end. This episode is amazing. I think it might be my favorite of the whole run. It's just... but it's built on so much, right? Like, if not for the season that precedes it, this episode as a standalone wouldn't have the same weight. But I think it's just really incredible, and part of what, in my memory of thinking like, oh, I love that show, a lot of the parts I'm thinking of are from this episode. And so let's talk a little bit about what happens in this episode. Of course, we left off last time with Section 9 essentially being eliminated. The rest of the government is blaming them, is basically trying to pin on them this, this accusation that they're a death squad, unaccountable to the rest of government, and that they're violent terrorists and need to be eliminated. And we know that it's more complicated than that. It's this whole political machination where because the target of their criminal conspiracy investigation is so powerful, it becomes this whole problem of how do you get the appropriate leverage to take out someone like that. And it seems pretty dire. We have everyone on the run. Last time we saw that Patsu was definitely apprehended, and Boma was, it was a little bit less clear what happened to him, but it certainly didn't look good. We had Saito and Ishikawa still on the loose. The Major had, gone on the run as well, and we finished the last episode with Bato essentially saying, it's my life, I'm going to waste it how I want, suggesting that his instruction from Aramaki to survive no matter what, and from the Major to essentially run off and be by himself, he's decided to refuse both of those instructions. So that's where we pick up this time. To begin with, we have Aramaki talking to other heads of government and basically trying to do everything he can to negotiate on the behalf of his people, because he's essentially worried that in this whole siege that's being done for political purposes, he's worried his people are going to get killed. And, the guy is essentially trying to say, well, hey, come on. As long as you don't get too personally involved with this, you'll be able to reform your unit later. And Aramaki's basically saying, if I don't have the same people that I did, then it's not even worth doing. And so we can see that he's struggling with this too, but his scale of problems is sort of in a different phase than everybody else's. Nobody's pointing a gun at his head, but at the same time, he's recognizing that if he is not able to maintain this level of government respectability, the unit has no way to exist, and he has no leverage to protect any of his people. So he's stuck in his own difficult situation there. We haven't seen Togasa, since last episode when he was arrested and interrogated, so we don't catch up with him at all now. It's like I said, it's looking pretty bleak. What we see is Saito, the sniper, getting apprehended, and we see Ishikawa managing to set off sort of a data bomb and an explosion designed to kill some of these soldiers coming after him, and then getting crap beaten out of him as a result, but also apprehended. And one of the things that they're really doing very effectively in these sequences is showing just how capable this opposition is. This mustached general and his men are shown as not lightweights. Section 9 is really excellent people who are very good at what they do, but it's made clear that the level of resources and competence in the enemy here is substantial. And so it is a real threat. And so now Saito, Ishikawa, both apprehended, but they've been doing what the major said, trying to get the information out into the world so that it can't all just be covered up. But this is where we start getting into some of the additional, the real meat of the episode. For one, we have the Tachikomas, who had been sent off to the lab, but we've now seen that at least one of them had been sent to like an old age home to be just like an assistant to the people there. And that's kind of a charming thing to happen. But we saw that Tachikoma witness the news of the attack on Section 9 and feel upset about it. And then we have a strange happenstance here where one of the old men brings this Tachikoma a shell for its cannon. And we are left to wonder exactly who it was that prompted that to happen, but we could imagine it being perhaps the major or perhaps the Laughing Man. But given what happens later, I think we probably need to conclude that it was the Laughing Man that did it, which is interesting. I wonder if there's anyone who had a different interpretation of that, because it's not confirmed one way or another. But what we have is the major showing up and seeming surprised by the Tachikoma's involvement. So that's why I think it was not her. Plus, hacking other people and making them do her bidding is not really the major's thing. That's more of something that the Laughing Man did on the regular. So that's why I'm pretty sure it was him. But in any event, what we have is that Tachikoma taking that as a clue that, yes, she needs to do something about this. And so returning to the scene of the Section 9 building, that Tachikoma is, which is also revealed as the one that Bato had fed its natural oil to, meets up with two other Tachikoma that have been modified in various ways. One that had been returned to the lab, and one that had been used for construction. And so now they all look different. And that, of course, ties into the Tachikoma Club thing at the end, where they're joking about it being like a Power Rangers or Magical Girls style anime where they all look different and have different powers and stuff. But it's interesting watching these three reconnect, because they were used to, for such a long time, always going out and experiencing the world, but then resynchronizing all of their memories. But now they are all have all been sent to very different places and have very different experiences, and were unable to synchronize, but now they have all returned to this same location and all having the desire to help Bato, which is nice. It's also kind of this weird, fun detail where, or fun, I don't know if that fun is the right word, where they talk about the Tachikoma that liked to read, and saying that the lab disassembled and dissected that one's brain. And the weird little addition, I think that Tachikoma liked it, though. And then the others discuss how lucky that one was to get to experience death. And this ties us back to that episode where the Tachikoma went rogue and found the little girl, for example. And just this a recognition again of this element where the Tachikomas, by their nature and programming, their voice always sounds kind of chirpy and cheerful, but we have to also ask the question, does that mean that's how the Tachikoma feels? Is it possible that it might feel differently and just still sound like that? Or is it possible also that its emotions are alien to us in a way that we wouldn't really be able to make sense of? Hard to know, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole Turing test concept, is that how can you tell? If you can't tell the difference, then what's the difference? And in any event, we see them uniting to want to try to help Bato. And there is also just this element of knowing that even though the one got the shell, they are not able to load their own cannon. Just mechanically, it was a safety precaution that had been mentioned in a prior episode, and but with all of them together, they were able to load it. So in the meantime, we have Bato, and what is his mission that he's setting out to do? And I love this. His mission is to basically prove the Major wrong. He was trying to insist that holding on to sentiment and memories and all of that is important, and she was trying to make it sound like, oh, well, you know, it's just sentiment. It'll get you killed if you aren't willing to part with it. And talking about how she had left her watch, her special watch, at the safe house, and so she felt it was too dangerous to try to go back for it. And so what does Bato decide to do? He's going to go get it. And it's basically just kind of this stubborn wanting to do something for her despite her telling him not to, but also like to kind of prove that it is important. And it's just this sort of complicated, messy, emotional thing that I just love about the two of them. And so he goes in and he is aware that it's quite possibly dangerous. He recognizes a couple of the Major's booby traps and avoids them, and is later able to use them against the soldiers attacking. And so we get a lot of shootout. We get a fun thing where she has extra weapons in a stash on the underside of her underwear drawer. And so he retrieves the watch, but now he's being assaulted, and he's up against two of these enormous robotic armored suits, and we see him take out one of them with the hacking the eyes trick. And I don't mind it in this sense, but I will say that I think this occasionally that is relied on, like, it's one thing for the Laughing Man to do it because he is explicitly, like, the whole idea of his character is that he is amazing at hacking, and that's why he can do stuff like that on the fly. It's less obvious because Bato has never done anything like that. We've never seen him do that sort of thing, so it's a little bit weird to see him do it here. Just because that's not really been in his tool belt before, but it's still, obviously it's kind of a satisfying trick, and it makes it look to that one like he's dead, so it'll come out of the armor. The pilot will come out of the armor, but unfortunately there's another one, and he's not able to pull the same trick, and so it's looking really bad because even though we can imagine that the order was still to bring him in alive, we can see that this other, suit pilot, furious that Bato killed his partner, is now maybe going to kill Bato instead of, bringing him in alive. And it's looking really bad. Bato loses his arm. He's in rough shape. But then that's when the Tachikoma show up to save him, and it's still touch and go because they don't have their ammo. They have the one tank shell, but they don't have their normal guns, and so they're basically just trying to dance around and distract this thing. One of them gets shot up. They're talking their teamwork. They're trying to plan and deal with this thing, but it's not going well. And then second one gets partially shot up, and now it's this whole dire thing where it's this setup for the perfect moment that the shell is going to pay off, and it's like, oh no, it misfires. And so there's this recognition, two of them have already died in the fighting, but then the third one, the blue one, the special one, recognizes that the only way to still use the shell to save Bato is to deliberately sacrifice itself. Because it's one thing to say, I'm going to go into this fight where I know it's dangerous and I might get killed or destroyed. It's another thing to say, I'm going to make that happen in order to save my friend. And they do it. And, Bato gets to see and is, goodbye, Mr. Bato. And it's this... And it's moving, it's this moving moment. And it is, as we were shown, it's the last of the Tashikomas. Those three were the only ones that were not, dismantled, and now they're gone. And in the aftermath of that, we have the Major show up. She's once again in her sort of her remote, kid body, the one that we saw her follow the Tachikoma on her spying mission, which is a nice little, callback detail too, since when she shows up, she's talking about the strange behavior that the Tachikoma developed, and she's expressing her own regret that she saw their emerging individuality only as a problem tactically, that it made them tactically unreliable and dangerous as a result. And, as I talked about when we had that episode, she's not wrong, but she also is now recognizing that she let that practical assessment prevent her from understanding how amazing it was that what was happening is that even amongst these identical hardware that were always resyncing their memories, they were nonetheless developing individuality. And so she saves a little chip, a little circuit board from one of them. It's unclear what, if anything, could be done with it, but she does hang on to it. Perhaps, if only as a memory, we might imagine. But so she is there to evacuate Bato before more soldiers show up. And they kind of, talk about how amazing it was that they developed self-sacrifice in a way that was meaningful. Because it's one thing to say for a robot, its programming is to protect people even at the cost of its hardware. But we also watched it happen and know that there was more to it than that. And I think that was just really amazing. And so then we have... the Major brings Bato back to her other safe house, switches back to her, out of the, the child remote body, and, Bato gives her the watch, so they talk about the watch and how he put himself in danger to get it. But then how she also came out of her own hiding to rescue him afterwards, because she basically told him, don't do that. So the fact that she was there to see that happen shows that she didn't run and stop paying attention to everyone like she said she was going to either. So for all of her words about how, you need to just let all that stuff go, maybe I'll just erase my memories of this stuff. And so, they have, Bato and the Major have this exchange where he gives her the watch. She, laughs that she knew that was what he was doing. And then what he says is, no matter how many prosthetic bodies you've went through, this was the one thing that was always ticking away, keeping the same time as you. Nowadays, that's far too fleeting. People entrust their memories to external devices because they want to set down solid physical proof that can distinguish them as unique individuals. That watch is all you have, though, isn't it? Your only external mnemonic device that identifies the person you've been up to this minute. And then she kind of sort of laughs it off again, as is her style. Those are pretty serious words. Where'd you get them from, I'd like to know. A watch and weight training gear, both of us have clung to pretty useless scraps of memory, haven't we? But at the same time that she's saying that, it's the two of them there together in that safe house, having risked, each other for each other, having risked themselves for the other. And I think, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful in his way. But, also just it ties into, the themes with the Tachikomas and, the themes from some of the other Ghost in the Shell properties, the movies and so on, where part of the Major's risk has always been the temptation for the ghost to leave the shell, essentially. Whether you want to call that a death wish or just this idea of losing your actual original identity altogether. And the Bato basically, calls her out on like the one thing that she keeps around, like this idea that how does she know that she is actually the person she thinks she is? Well, you can't ever know for sure, but at the very least, she has this watch that she remembers. And that's a piece of continuity. And even if it could be faked, it's still something, as opposed to nothing. And so the watch is obviously meaningful, and we see her put it on. But then we also have the, and in this wiki that I have been using for notes, and, when I watch the episode and then I'm just kind of refreshing my memory about them, it actually specifically calls out details that I did notice in my original viewing, but would certainly be easy to miss. Because as Bato and the Major go to leave this safe house, we see that the soldiers have still indeed tracked them there, and they've essentially got orders that they wanted to take everybody alive except the Major, presumably because she was just too dangerous, and so therefore it's like you've got to just try to take her out if you can. And so we see from an extreme long distance sniper rifle, her head is blown up, and she is apparently killed. Bato is certainly, moved by it, and he's, distraught. But the key detail here is when we pan away from the headless body that results, not wearing the watch. And I think that's an amazing detail that I was, so proud of myself for seeing at the time, just because even though we don't understand exactly at this point what has happened, it seems like a notable detail that after all of this business to get the watch and what it means and all of that, it seems like the Major has been killed, but the body's not wearing the watch. Anyway, this is an amazing episode, and it's a big part of what it kind of it's like an emblem, emblazons? No, I can't think of the word there. Maybe I'm trying to invent a word that doesn't exist. I don't know. Anyway, what was I saying? Okay, it exemplifies what I like about the show overall. Anyway, so I think that'll do it for this week, though. And even though it was a huge temptation when watching to just proceed right on into the finale, instead I will be doing that next week on Sunday, and then I will, of course, talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.